I love Dr. King's speech, I Have a Dream speech. And I don't think people really understood his very last words of that speech when he said, when all of us, black men, white men, Jews, Gentiles, Protestant Catholics, will join hands in singing the old Negro spiritual. He's saying that we're all in this together. Free at last, free at last. Think out of mind. And I think people thought it was just black people. It's like, no, all of us. That this racism, this hate, all of us can sing together. We are free. All of us are free of that. And a lot of people understand that's what it is. To all of us to say we are free at last. All of us. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.
Hello, and welcome to the What's So Funny About podcast, brought to you by the Liberation Comedy Project, liberationcomedy.org. I'm your host, Pedro Silva. And on What's So Funny About, we say we talk to funny people about serious topics. And today, for Black History Month, we're talking with Wali Collins, a top New York City comedian, an accomplished drummer, and a funny guy. Wali, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I wasn't doing anything, and I said, you know what, I want to talk to somebody. And so, Pedro, here we are.
Nice, man. I love it when it works out that way. So I love asking people how they got into comedy because I had a rough start into it. So I'd love to hear how you got into it, especially coming from an architect and a musician.
Wait, you had a rough start?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, go ahead. I want to hear. Well, now I'm interested in what.
Oh, my rough start?
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, the first time I just went, people who have heard this before, not the whole story, but I tried to do it just to overcome a fear of public speaking, and also to just kind of, my family was really able to speak publicly, and it just seemed like out of place that I would not be able to. So I tried to overcome it, but I didn't like telling personal stories, and I didn't want to say dirty things, and I didn't want to cuss. And so it pretty much eliminated everything funny. But I still tried to do stand-up comedy. And so my first set, I decided to do it on my hemorrhoids.
Oh my God. Okay.
And it just didn't go over well. It was the wrong audience, the wrong content, the wrong everything. And the first thing person I said, "That's disgusting." So it just didn't go over well, and I was just sweating, waiting for it to be over.
You should have called me. I would definitely helped you out.
Yeah. So that's how I got started. And I said, okay, don't do that again. And it took me about 20 years to go back and try to do it again, but now I'm better at it.
But you know, it's interesting, and I know we're kind of jumping ahead here, but when I started doing comedy, I just thought if I get a laugh, I'm funny. And one day, I was very, very blue. I was one of the dirtiest, bluest, because I thought, hey, if they're laughing, I'm funny. And one day, my military dad and my Christian mother wanted to see my set. This is when I'm just starting out.
Man.
Exactly. And I'm like, nah, you don't want to see it. You don't want to see it. Because I knew there wasn't cursing allowed in my house, you know? So my father, being intimidating as he could be, he says, oh, no, we're going to see your set right now. So I remember going in the living room just in front of my parents, and I got up there and like Eddie Murphy, filth and foreign and foreign and filth and filth. My father said, stop. He goes, first of all, pick up your mother because she fainted. And he said that we didn't raise you this way. You know, you're a good kid. We raised you, to basically raise you to be proud of you in all your endeavors. And that's not a representation of you or us. He said, basically he said, just imagine us in your audience. Now go be funny. And they basically were saying, we want to be proud of what you do. And I said, okay. And I remember I had to change my set or act, whatever, imagining my parents in the audience. And it could be done. I'm a clean comic. I do tons of, of corporate shows, and there's tons of, other things you can do. I work in resorts, work in cruise ships. So yeah, a clean comedy can be done, and clean, funny comedy can be done. So, you just find your niche, and you just ride it out, and just, and it's a great journey. So yes, you can definitely talk about your hemorrhoids, but there's clever ways to go about doing it too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I wasn't clever yet.
but it can be done for those who are listening and feel that comedy is talking about something coming out of your crotch, something with your crotch, or something in that whole midsection, which is funny. No, not at all. There's so many other topics that you can talk about that you can make funny, and that's the best part of being a comedian is putting a twist on what we take for granted.
Hmm. So when you were you already working as an architect and started doing comedy on the side, or did you? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And were you encouraged by somebody to do it, or is this something you were like, I want to do?
Yeah, it was one of those things. Well, I mean, I was a musician, I was an architect and a musician, and I thought my life was, working during the day and on weekends, working wedding bands and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And I was always like the funny guy in the band. I was always like the announcer, whatever, and I really
Hmm.
enjoy people laughing, you
Yeah.
know. And so yeah, and I want to do more. And my mother said to me, she asked me if you could be anything you wanted to be, what would it be? And I said, I'd love to be an actor. And she says,
Mm.
well, why are you designing buildings if you want to be an actor? And I said, well, no one famous ever came from Springfield, Massachusetts. That's where I was born. And
Mm.
she gave me three incredible words. She said, you never know. I'm like, what do you
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
She says, you never know unless you try. And I was so surprised. And I said, you're cool with that? She goes, all we want is our children to be happy, with their future and with their goals. It makes no sense for you to go to work and grind that out and hate that and then hate, coming home and blah, blah, blah. So she says, be responsible and go for your dream because you never know unless you try. And I kept that as my mantra. You never know, you never know, you never know. And I cut it down to one word, you never know. And
Hmm.
that's later. We'll talk about that later. But I started a company and all that from, motivating me to try things that I was curious. So I found out where a comedy club was. Well, they had comedy night at this in this lobby at this hotel. It was called Hotel Warren, but the E fell off, so they call it the Hot L Warren. And true story, man. And I went there. It's still there actually. And
That's awesome.
yeah, and I went there and I bombed on my first time there. And I thought, oh, and let me tell you something. I was so confident slash arrogant how I knew how funny I was. They told me to prepare 5 minutes. I prepared 10 minutes
Mm.
because I knew I was going to get an encore because I knew I was that funny. And I did
Mm.
my 10 minutes in 3 minutes. And I had 2 minutes of nothingness. I had 2 minutes of, I was so bad. I wasn't getting any laughs. You can hear someone spinning, what do you call it? Stirring the
Turn that
ice.
glass.
Yeah, you
Uh-huh.
can. That's how bad it was.
Oh
So
man.
it was
That's
awful.
that's
So
awesome.
I could see my car through the window of this bar or whatever, and I was making a beeline to that car, and the producer slash manager Booker like stopped us. Where you going? And I said, "Oh man, I tried it. I stunk." He goes, "No, man, you're good. You have great stage presence. You have to learn how to write material. That's one of the things. But you have the gift." And so he encouraged me. He put $5 in my hand. He goes, "You're a regular comic now. Come back every Wednesday." And I would come back every Wednesday, put $5 in my hand, and I worked on the craft, and I really enjoyed it.
That's
And
awesome.
I just built it up. So yeah, I just built up the set, and yeah, and then I moved out to Boston and started working out in Boston, and it just went from there. But the start of it was my mother telling me, "You never know,"
Hmm.
and it's true. You never know unless you try, and and I have stories from that.
Yeah. So didn't Dr. Seuss come from Springfield?
Yeah, yeah.
So just somebody famous came from
Petey
Springfield.
Geisler, yeah, yeah. They have a museum dedicated to him. Yeah, and the Basketball Hall
Yeah.
of Fame is in
Yep.
Springfield.
Yep. Basketball Hall of Fame too. So hey, that's a decent place to be.
Oh, and Milton Bradley is from Springfield, Massachusetts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. The
Aha,
game.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I got stomped. So yeah, I when I first tried it, I was like, I just was in this weird kind of space, and then I knew that I wanted to connect with people, but I was like a person who was like really into books
Right.
and more into books than people.
Okay.
And so, but then there's some part of me I knew I needed to like reach out to people more and things like that. So that's kind of why I started it.
Okay.
And I knew because like my brother was funny, and my younger brother he was funny, and it sounded like I'm looking up to him, but anyway, he was funny, and he would just be saying stuff, and you would see people like looking like the eyes like glassing, like this dude's so cool, but he was like completely irresponsible, and I was like, how is like this dude could be like completely irresponsible, like make bad grades in school and everything, but he can make you laugh.
Right.
And I was just like that was like magic. And it's like I knew it was in there somewhere,
Yeah.
but I wasn't letting it out. I would let it out like if I was with my brother or my cousins, I'll start catching the wave. But
Right.
other than that, I was like, it's too serious. And and then I was always scared I was gonna tell a story about somebody, and then they would be like, "Oh," they'd be mad at me. So it's like it's just too many. I had too many rules, so I had to drop the rule. But fundamentally, when I came back around to it, I thought, you know, even when people are like angry or whatever the case may be, if you can get them to laugh, it's like disarming, you know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's what I started wanting to pay more attention to. And the Liberation Comedy Project idea came out of some of that. Like we have so much polarization going on and people hating everybody and
Hmm.
not digging deep into our own, quirks and stuff like that. And I said, man, what if we just tried to get people to laugh more at themselves, laugh more at the situation, laugh at the ridiculousness of
Yep.
some of the things? Because so much about our society is ridiculous, and I just thought
Oh
we could
yeah.
laugh at it.
Definitely.
Yeah. So like in your journey, obviously, it seems like you can kind of have sets with all types of people. Like, do you observe comedy bringing people together across differences or building societal or social
Right.
cohesion or anything like that?
Yeah. My favorite kind of audience is diverse as possible. If there's
Mm,
Jews, Asians, Muslims, Christians, all in the same, white, black. If they're all in the same room, I love it. I love it.
yeah.
Because there is that common ground, and finding it and then just dancing all in that common ground. It's amazing how you're this room of complete strangers and complete
Mm-hmm.
lifestyles and cultures, and you find that common ground. It's amazing. And then when I worked out in China, and that's the other story,
Oh
but
wow.
yeah, that's yeah, you find that common ground, and boom, it's beautiful.
I would definitely love to hear about you doing China comedy in China.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just let's jump into that. So you did comedy in China for Chinese audiences?
Well, it was interesting. I When I went out there, this is a guy named Jamie Gong, who was an incredible producer. He was raised in Hong Kong, and then he moved to New York City with his family, and he did comedy out here in New York. And he wanted to go back to see his family and hang out with his family, and so he moved back to Hong Kong, and he wanted to start a comedy club, and he
Mm,
brought a lot of us over to do comedy in Hong Kong, and it was very, very interesting because Chinese culture, they don't have sarcasm,
mm,
so a lot of comedy is saying stuff that you don't mean, but it's just
mm-hmm.
exaggerated. So we have the shows, they would be in English, and expats will come, a lot of Australians, a lot of
Yeah.
British people, but it will probably be like 40, 30, 40% of native Chinese, and they understood English. But it was very, very interesting because when we started out, you do a joke and you do the punchline, the expats will laugh, but then you hear like this pause, and then the people from Hong Kong or China, they would laugh because, oh, you don't mean it that way. Oh, it's
Yeah.
not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so they kind of got that. And so then they started coming back to the point they started doing comedy. And
Mm.
Jamie was like, I don't need you guys anymore. I got tons of, Asian comedians here. So
Oh,
there
that's
was a
awesome.
big boom. Yo, it was crazy. So there was this crazy boom in the early 2000s of Asian comedians. And so now, yeah, I mean, you can Google Asian comedians and you see them doing comedy and, Mandarin, Cantonese.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so it definitely can, it works. It definitely works.
Awesome. Well, you know what's funny? when
Mm.
I was the first time I did stand up, I was actually in school studying Mandarin to be a
Ah.
Mandarin linguist.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I was that's what I was studying. And I was like, just kind of like hanging out a lot by myself. And I knew I was gonna have to do some stuff for class, like speaking in front of the class
Right.
in Mandarin. So that's
Right.
partly why I was like, you know what, let me just get myself out here and start practicing saying stuff in public. So that's kind of
Ah.
how, yeah. And you know, this is I said this to somebody. I actually said this in one of my sets that I learning Mandarin actually helped me out because I made more sense to myself in Mandarin than I did in English,
Okay.
which is like this is like a whole tangent. I won't go too far in it, but you know, sometimes since this is going to be aired in Black History Month, might as well get into it. So, in
Okay.
my perspective, a lot of times, like the language, like back in our ancestral history, there was a language that our people spoke to their desires, their strengths, their freedoms, their wishes, their all these things. And then
Hmm.
when English got impressed upon us, English wasn't designed to articulate our particular concerns. And so
Really?
sometimes when we try to talk about how we want to be liberated and we use English to discuss or articulate our own liberation, it actually doesn't communicate well because the people whose language is natively English, they feel like they have an ownership of the language. So if
Okay.
we try to articulate our freedom or liberation in some kind of way, they hear it and they're just like, nah, something's not right about that. It doesn't sound right coming out of your mouth. And we can't really kind of connect with that unconsciously. But
Huh.
there were certain phrases and certain things in Mandarin that I could say, and I would be like, this is what I could sense inside of myself. This is what I feel. This is what I
Okay.
mean. And because I was a very literal person at that time, that
Hmm.
language really helped me unlock some parts of myself.
Good.
That's why I was like, man, that's kind of cool. And I've been to Hong Kong and Beijing, Nanjing, like a lot of places in
Yeah,
China.
been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Suzhou,
So
Wuxi, been
yeah,
out, been all
yeah.
over.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story, right? This is in one of my sets anyway. But like when I was after I stopped being a Mandarin linguist, I was kind of like bopping around, not knowing what I want to do with myself. But I wanted to keep my Mandarin up. So I
Right.
moved to a place in Atlanta that had a lot of Asian people
Okay.
and was selling cars. And they needed like some Chinese speaking car salesman.
Oh,
So
wow.
sometimes when they would say Chinese speaking car salesman to the front, I would come up.
Oh, that's
And then the
hilarious.
Chinese, yeah, and the Chinese people would be like, what? And back then I had locks. I had like locks down on my shoulder outside, and I was living in Atlanta and they would be like, what? Like, what is that? And one particular time, this family, they said, we said Chinese speaking car salesman. And the manager, Greg, said, well, you get what you get.
Right.
The other
Right.
two Chinese speaking car salesmen who were Chinese, they were already occupied. So they just assumed I didn't know anything. So they got in the car and they were starting to say how much they were going to offer for the car. And I was listening to them. And then I said, man, I feel kind of embarrassed that I'm listening to that conversation. They don't know I understand. So I told the guy, I said, sir, I just want to let you know I understand what you're saying. So if you want to take some space to discuss with your wife, like feel free to do that. Let's let me out of the car. And he was like, oh, you can't understand me. I'm speaking Chinese. And I was like, no, sir, I do
Wait a
understand
minute. You
you.
told him in English that you
I
understand what he
told
was
him in
saying?
English.
Oh, okay.
I told him in English. I said, I do understand you. And then he was like, no, 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 no. And then and he was just like, no, this is impossible. So then I said, ting de dong ni gang sai shou de hua. It's like, I understand what you just said. And then he was like, and he got shocked. And he was like, how is this possible? And then he said, then he said, he's like, he tried to go digging in. I said, well, I study Mandarin. He said, you are a linguistic genius. And I said, no, no, I went to school and studied it. And then he said, no, no, you don't understand. You are a linguistic genius. A black man speaking Chinese, it's impossible because black people can't even speak English.
What?
And I was like, well, that's, yep. And I was like, oh my God. And when I say it in my set, I kind of like make accents. I'm not doing that right now. But at any rate, but yeah, that's what he said, man. And I was like, oh my God. It
Whoa.
was, yeah, yeah. And then he felt he didn't, he just said it like flat out, no problem. I said, okay, wild. So, but I've had I think like being exposed to different cultures too actually opened me up to comedy and being funny and realizing like different people see different things funny, and then there's some things that cross across those differences. And I've
Mm-hmm.
been just trying to hone that what crosses the differences is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what I've been leaning into. So like when you first started, did you always start with diverse audiences, or did you start out just like whoever was there in Spring? I don't know the demographics of Springfield. The people I know in Springfield are all black, but I'm sure there's other people.
Yeah, there are other people.
Okay.
No, I started out pretty much white audiences. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I didn't start working. I think the first time I worked in front of a black crowd was when I did the Apollo and got booed on TV. And
Nice.
oh yeah, and here is the what's the word I'm looking for here? The conundrum to that was that so it was live at the Apollo and Sinbad was hosting it, and it was on TV. I got booed, and they aired it, me getting booed, and I would get residuals from the. So I don't know how to handle that.
Oh man, you're like, oh man, I want them to play it again, but at the same time, I used to watch it. I probably saw you get booed. I used to watch Apollo all
Probably,
the time.
yeah. So yeah, that's tough. I don't know. I'm still trying to make sense of that. Like, do I feel bad about this? I'm embarrassed. However, I'm getting
Yeah,
paid.
that's awesome, man. Yeah, I remember Sandman Sims. Did Sandman come out and get
Oh
you?
yeah, definitely.
Oh man, that is awesome.
And what's interesting about that? As I'm getting booed, oh man, so many things are going through my mind. But I remember seeing Sandman on my left, and I was like, oh, well, that's Sandman. Like I was like, like a
You didn't
fan.
realize he was coming to get you.
I was like,
That is
oh,
awesome, man.
he's getting me off stage. I'm like, oh, nice to meet you, Mr. Sandman.
Oh man, I used to have a crush on Kiki Shepard.
Oh my goodness, get in line.
Yeah, yeah, man. Oh, that was hilarious, man. That was
Yeah,
like, whenever I watched Showtime at Apollo, I used to be like, boy. And when comedians got up there, I used to be like, boy, I can never do that. Like I used
no,
to think that, I used to think like, man, they're coming in, and it was like, it was. I can't even get into it, but it was hilarious, and I love knowing somebody that got booed on, got
well, there
booed
you go.
on Apollo, because
Nice to
like
meet you.
that's the stage, bro. That's the stage. Like if like whether you survive with laughs or survive getting booed, once you do that, it's like that's you. You got it.
Yeah, but what's interesting, man, and since it's Black History, we'll get into it. Which I thought was just really interesting. It took me a while. I went to my parents, and I was like, I was really messed up in the head about it because I saw when I went out there on that stage, I saw my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. I felt I was home.
Hmm.
I felt when I got on that stage that, oh, all this hard work that I've done, da da da. I made it. I made it to perform in front of my people. And
Hmm.
the thing that just shocked me was that they didn't accept me.
Hmm.
And we are the only culture that will rip ourselves apart and just I would say boo us, downgrade us, humiliate us. There's no other cultures. The Jews don't do it, Asians don't do it, white people don't do it, but we're the only ones that will put ourselves out there to say, here I am, I'm open, I'm being open to you, and we're like, yeah, we'll crush you, we will crush you.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I remember getting booed, and I stood out there for a second, like, what are you doing? This is I'm one of you. Why
Hmm.
are you showing so much hate and disdain for me when I'm
Hmm.
and and for the longest time, and I think I needed therapy for it, but I didn't know who to go to,
Hmm.
to make sense of it. And also, you had to be a certain type of comic. You had to be almost, I don't want to say it though, a clown.
Hmm.
A better words. You had to
Hmm.
be over the top. You had,
Hmm.
and um, wide audiences or diverse audiences accepted me for me. But working in front of a black audience, I really necessarily couldn't be me until years later. I got up there and said, I don't care what you think. I'm not looking for you to accept me. This is what I have to offer. If you don't want it, well then, that's your fault. It's not
Mm-hmm.
my fault, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're the only culture that does that. That we will tear ourselves down, you know. So
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on that. And when you came to that point where you were like, "Hey, this is what I got to offer," did you see a transformation in the way that you were accepted with Black audiences, or that's just your own personal journey that you just got to that place?
it was a little bit of both. It was a little bit of both. When I got in front of black audiences, I, nest, I got out there a little more aggressive to say, you know what? And I think that's what the black culture looks at. They're like, whoa, they're almost like you have to go over the top, like, look, this is what it is. This is what, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay. And then
Yeah.
you kind of like relax, whatever. But I don't like doing that. I don't like to have to be, so to speak, over the top, to be that aggressive to get their respect, to get their attention, and then the
Mm-hmm.
respect. But for me, that's how it works. Um, which is what. But here's the interesting thing: if there are if there's a diverse audience and there are black people in the diverse audience, they're a little more tamed, a little more reserved to be like, "Boo,
Mm-hmm.
you stuck," or whatever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I do though, I lean more towards when I see black folks in the audience. My attitude is leaning more towards like it is a struggle that we're here, and this
Mm-hmm.
is what it's like what it's like to be in this world,
Mm-hmm.
of being black, and then
Mm-hmm.
they can relate. It's very interesting, man. They relate, and then they're like, "Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, we get it."
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm in a black audience, it's a different dynamic and it's a different way of being accepted.
Yeah. Man, I didn't think we are going to go this deep, but I think now that we're on it, let's go there. Like one of
Yeah.
the things that I think there's a lot of things. The first thing that comes to my mind is Malcolm X's teaching that black people, the worst thing that white people ever did to black people was to teach us to hate ourselves.
Yes.
So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing that comes to mind is that systemically, you know, through Black Americans who have had the legacy of slavery and all those things that it kind of impact how we show up in the world. Well, back in those days, you couldn't make a mistake. You know what I mean? If
Mm-hmm.
you were, picking cotton or chopping wood or whatever you were doing, like you were treated like a machine and you had to perform at optimal level or
Mm-hmm.
suffer some kind of abuse. So there's a sense of like disempowerment and like a high level of performance that you have to do in certain contexts. So then when you get away from that context, away from that gaze that says like you gotta be on it, there's this need to release because we can't release our emotions in a lot of the other contexts like work and different things like that because it'll just get seen in a way like an exaggerated sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
but then that desire, that need to express oneself more fully, we do that in predominantly black spaces, like or black church or comedy club or someplace where dancing or whatever it is that we can be like unreserved. And
Right.
so I think that there's a space where if you come in and you have like you're reserved in some kind of way, it triggers that sense that you have when you're outside of in the outside world where you have to be reserved. It's like this is not the place to be reserved. We're among each other. Don't be reserved now. Now you gotta like explode, and this is the place to let all the laughter out, let all the tears out, let all the whatever out. And it
Mm-hmm.
took me because I had similar experiences, and I would say it took me having a soul wound that felt so devastating that I was like, dang, I don't think I could come back from this pain.
Mm-hmm.
That then when I got back in front of the same people, it's almost like they could tell, oh, he knows now. He's
Mm-hmm.
got he's got the wound,
Right.
and that's I think a part of being a Black American, specifically in that we like I don't know, it's very complicated, but laughter is an emotional expression,
Right.
And it's just like, I don't know, it's cool to talk to somebody about that who's also had similar experiences and also been around different types of audiences to be able to gauge that experience, because that's what I felt. I felt both preaching, and I've never done an all black audience because I live in Colorado. but when in terms of comedy, but
Hmm.
when black people are there, I can feel some of the similar, vibes. So I feel for you, man. I feel for you for the Apollo. Now I'm like, I was laughing at first and I'm still laughing now, but I'm laughing, but inside I'm crying.
Yeah, man. It was, but like I said, for the longest time, I was so
Yeah.
confused, figure it out. And it's interesting. My mother, she knew it, but she was she was trying her hardest to try to explain it to me that
Yeah.
those are not your people. And I'm like, what do you mean they're not my people? They're my people. She goes, no, they're
Hmm.
not. And for the longest time, I didn't understand that.
Right.
And as time went on, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And whoever's listening to this, if you are of black culture, of color, I should say, or not of color, you're probably not going to understand what we're talking about.
Hmm.
Because I look at, I have tons of white friends, and sometimes I would dip into my struggle of like talking about trying to get a cab or talking about not getting waited on at a restaurant. And I would say, because I'm black, they're like, oh, you and that black thing. And these are my good friends,
Yeah.
and they're like, of course they serve you because you're a nice guy. And I'm like, they don't see that. They
Right.
do not see. They see a dark skinned person,
Yep.
and then I remember when the whole George Floyd thing happened. My white friends were like, asking me what could they do to support whatever, and I told them, I said, learn, educate yourself.
Hmm.
And then once that trend went, kind of blew over, I don't hear from them anymore. I don't,
Right.
so it's not in their world. It's not part of their struggle. Meanwhile, it's
Hmm.
part of our struggle
Right.
to when we walk into a room, I try to explain to them, when a white man walks into a room, his scores or whatever, his accolades are all there, but a black man walks into a room, we have to get the scores, we have to get the points. If you walk in with a suit, oh, that's a point, good point.
Hmm.
Speak a certain way, oh, it's a good point. If you have money,
Hmm.
oh, blah, blah, blah. But that's assumed with a white guy. And they're like,
Hmm.
oh, I never understood. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I deal with every day, every day.
Hmm.
And I kind of get the, oh, okay, I understand, but it's not their world. So why
Right.
should they be concerned about it or worry about it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's complicated because I mean, I look at like I know that you read a lot of Black history and stuff like that, and as do I.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I learned because I grew up with some of my family in the Nation of Islam, so I
Mm.
was exposed to a richer side of Black history that wasn't taught in schools.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it informed me and informed how I showed up in the world. And ironically, it actually distanced me from other Black people
There you go.
because
Yep.
yeah, it distanced me from other Black people, and I understand why that was happening. Because at first,
Mm-hmm.
because if they didn't have that level of exposure, then what
Right.
they knew of themselves was like, okay, slavery, Martin Luther King Jr., he got killed, is over,
Right.
and I was emerging from this other context, and my dad is actually from Africa, even though he was a Portuguese citizen, so
Mm-hmm.
he was considered Portuguese in terms of his like documentation at the time because he was from
Right.
Cape Verde.
Right.
So,
Right.
but now Cape Verde is considered part of Africa, but at the time it was considered a part of Europe. So when he came to America, he had like kind of like the European privilege, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't like it didn't translate to me, you
Right.
know. And it's like and he had a hard time understanding that because he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't born in America. He didn't understand like how I was viewed,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom is Black, so he didn't have that understanding, and he just kind of I don't know. It was an interesting mix because having both a father who wasn't, he didn't know what it was like. I mean, people tried to oppress my dad, but my dad, because he had already 30 years old when he came to America, he would just be like, get the hell out of my face. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
And then when people would hear his accent and all this other stuff, and he was like a tall, suave kind of dude.
Hmm.
So he had a different worldview. And I
Right.
had this other worldview growing up black here in America.
Hmm.
And it gave me both this idea of a bigger world, but then it also made me dig deeper into the black history
Right.
and to absorb that. And a lot of us just don't get that. It's not taught in
Oh,
schools as we know. And a lot of parents don't do it because I don't even know why. Like I try to make my kids pay attention to this kind of stuff, but a lot of us don't know. And then it, like I said, ironically, that power that we could have by walking in our own like groundedness and rootedness and understanding the historical arc.
right.
Like if it doesn't translate, people feel like you think you're better.
Well, yeah, and also I wanted to say that one of the big ones is dark skin.
Yeah.
That and people don't understand that having dark skin is so it's such a incredible a feature that melanin now, and I don't know if you know that, but they use melanin in technology,
Mm-hmm.
and but they use actual melanin in cell phones,
Mm-hmm.
and the darker you are, the more valuable you are, and they don't tell you how they get the melanin, and
Mm-hmm.
which I'm trying to figure out, how do you get the melanin, but
I don't know that.
yeah.
But I did know that melanin is a neurotransmitter.
Hmm.
So like in terms of like with our brain functioning, so the higher melanin content, the higher neuro I don't know, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I can't explain it, but I read in this book a book called Darwin's Ghost, and it was
Right.
talking about how melanin is a neurotransmitter that
Yeah.
helps like shape the way you even process information.
Yeah, and so and also the thing about how man started in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
How a black woman can have a white child, but a white woman can have a black child.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that we are involved in, we excel. Name it, anything, we excel. So and then the beauty part of it, how we're brainwashed to saying that beauty start, blonde blue eyes is beauty, and they're like, wait, don't I think beauty should start from the beginning, where a dark person with all these features and qualities about them were probably something that you would emulate and find valuable. But for some reason in this world, it's just the opposite. We're disrespected. We're conquered. We're colonized, and we're considered ugly. And and it bothers me. I ain't gonna lie, I was brainwashed thinking
Mm-hmm.
that me being a dark man, that oh my god, oh man, I'm less than. But
Mm-hmm.
educating myself, I'm like, oh no, I'm a walking $1 billion right now.
Yeah. See, like for me, I like think about this a lot too, because like my brother was darker than me.
Hmm.
And even though we had the same parents, and I'm like in the middle mocha or whatever, I don't know what I am. But
Right.
but in certain contexts, like we ended up my dad and my mom split. My dad married a white lady.
Mm.
And I looked like, especially when I was younger, I could be her kid, but my brother didn't look like he could be her kid.
Right.
And
Right.
so you could feel the affection that, or whatever you want to call it, that she had towards me was greater than what she had towards my brother, because
Interesting.
there was no sense, and I was able to sense it. And it
Right.
really like it would hurt me. And my brother, like I think some of the, I don't want to speak for him, but I think some of his performative nature and drawing like laughter and making people forget about things and all the like charming things about his personality, I think came somewhat out of that. Whether I'm not sure, I got to talk to him one day to find out if he really what he feels about it. But it was almost like he I don't know. It was like he knew and he overcame it with this like jovial radiance, like joking all the time kind of thing that made
Hmm.
him more attractive. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And I was busy trying to figure out like what the heck is going on, like reading like slave narratives and stuff like that as a
Hmm.
kid. And we had he was endeared more to the kids in our neighborhood, and I was completely the opposite. And I was more like trying to tell people like, don't believe the lies, blah blah blah.
Right, right,
But it would backfire on me. It would
right.
backfire on me because and then yeah, it's complicated, man. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going when I do the intro for the redoing of the intro, I'm saying now for a serious episode on what's so funny about comedy. We're really
more,
gonna get
more,
serious.
more in depth. More in depth. I think that's
Yeah,
probably.
more in depth. So, like, let me ask you. One of the questions I usually ask people is, what is the worst uh experience they ever had from their comedy? Looks like you already told me
Yeah.
the worst feedback. What was
Well, no,
the best
I'll tell
response?
you I'll tell you the worst one.
Oh, okay, there was something worse. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, something worse.
I gotta
Uh,
laugh at your pain, man. I'm just joking.
One of the probably the worst was when I was working, starting out working in Connecticut, and I was any place where there was a stage, I would go on, I would go on and try to do comedy. And I remember I was working at this biker bar or whatever.
Oh,
And,
Jesus.
yeah. And this guy was heckling me, and I was feeling it. So, he heckled me, and I gave him a retort, as they say. And his friend's like, "Oh, he got you." And so he tried to do another one, and I kind of like ninjaed my way and spun it around and put it back on him. They're like, "Oh, that's two times. He got you, man. He got you." So then he said something else, and I really got him like a zinger, whatever. And then he dropped the N word.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and I
I
said,
thought
"That's
that
all."
was where it was going.
Yeah, and I said, "That's all you got. That's the best. That's." I said, "You threw all your cards. That was your ace." I said, "Well, first of all, where is one? Because I'm afraid of them too." I know. I said, "I don't like them either." And they're like, ah. He goes, "Yeah, you don't like." He goes, "You don't like him?" I go, "No." He goes, "How about this?" And he leaned back and he showed me his revolver and
Hmm.
tapped on it. And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh, okay." So basically, he showed me his gun and,
Hmm.
and kind of like threatened me with his gun. And that's when I was like, you know what? Comedies, is going to kill. I don't know if it's worth dying for. So I'm like, okay, you got me. You got a gun. I'm not going to, say anymore, whatever. But that really bothered me that, that I was able to use my words. And this guy, he resorted to, basically violence, a threat of
Hmm.
violence. And
Hmm.
that taught me a lot. That taught me that, you know what? Um, I do have the chops to handle myself, but the world's still not ready for this black kid to kind of, show that he's, I don't want to say better than, but he can hang with them.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Nah, that's yeah, that's it's good we're talking about this. You know, I was thinking about this other situation I had where I was when I was going for the test to study to be a language analyst, and
mm-hmm,
this white dude had taken it before me,
mm-hmm,
and I said, "Oh, how did the test go?" He said, "Oh, it's hard, man. I failed." I said, "Oh, okay." And then I said, "Well, I'm gonna go try to take it too." And then he
okay,
said, "Well, why?" And I said, "To see if I can be a language analyst." And he
okay.
was like, "Well, I mean, you're gonna be disappointed." And I said, "Well, I mean, that's fine. I'm just gonna go take the test." And then he said, "Well, look, if I didn't pass it, then you won't pass it." And I said, "Well, why do you say that?" You know? And he was
Uh-huh.
like, "Man," and he was like, "Don't make me say it." But he was basically saying I was dumber because I was black. And I was like, I said, what are you trying to insinuate? And then he was just like, I'm just saying, man, you shouldn't worry about taking it. I don't want to see you disappointed, which was just ignorance on many levels.
Right,
So
right,
then I went and took it. And I don't know, the Holy Spirit got me or something, man, but I was in the zone and
right.
I took it. And then after it was over, you're supposed to get your test scores in like 2 weeks. But this
Mm-hmm.
major who had taken the test too and wanted his scores immediately. And I was
Okay.
waiting to get out of the door. And he was in front of me. And he said to the test taker, who was a black guy, he said, give me my scores now. And the guy was
Mm-hmm.
like, sir, you got to wait 2 weeks. And he was like, he showed his rank and said, this says I don't have to wait. And the guy was like, oh, he said, you got a scan machine there, don't you? And he was like, yeah. So he scanned it. The black dude scanned it. And then he said, well, sir, you failed. And the guy was like,
What?
yeah, and it was this white major dude. And the dude just looked like shocked. He was just like, like,
Right, right,
what?
right.
This happened? I failed? So then he said, yes, sir. And then he said, then the guy said, hey, I got the machine out anyway. Do you want to know your scores? And I said, no, I'm good. I can wait the 2 weeks. And he said, let me just score it. And, we'll see. And the major's still standing there. And I
Right.
said, oh, I guess if you want to. He stuck it through the thing. Then he was like, whoa. And then he was like, what? And then I said, what? He said, I never seen a score this high before. And I was like, and the major looked like he looked like he was dying.
Right,
He
right,
just looked
right.
like I can't believe this just happened. Like this E3, no, I was an E4 at the time. This E4 just just smoked me. And the guy was like, man, you could get any language you want, man. And the black guy was
Wow.
so happy because there was another black dude that was doing it. He was like, yeah, man, you can do
Wow.
it. And it was like that it messed with that dude's mind. And like I actually I don't want to overtalk, so I'll just say I resonate with that, and I think that the systemic issue of putting us against each other, like black versus white and this versus that,
Mhm.
and attributing certain things to one category versus another category, actually robs everyone.
Yes.
It robs everyone. Like when people diminish us, they have to actually hold that negative energy inside of themselves to keep us down, and
Yeah.
that keeps them from accessing the higher levels of their own consciousness, intelligence, and awareness.
I want to say that I love Dr. King's speech. I have a dream speech, and I don't think people really understood his very last words of that speech when he said, "When all of us, black men, white men, Jews, Gentiles, Protestant Catholics, will join hands in singing the old Negro spiritual." He's saying that we're all in this together, free at
Right,
last, free at last. Think out of mind. And I think people saw it just black people. It's like, no, all of us, that
right,
this racism, this hate, all of us can sing together. We are free. All of us are free of that. And a lot of people don't
exactly.
understand that's what it
Yeah,
is. To all of us to say we are free at last. All of us. Thank God
yeah,
Almighty, we're free at last.
yeah. No, man, that's so true. That's so true. So, let me see. There was a couple things I wanted to ask you. One of them was there anything off limits in comedy? I always ask people that, like, what's their thoughts on comedy? Is there anything you think is off limits? I mean, especially you've chosen to go the it's called clean route.
Right.
Um, but do you think there's anything off limits in comedy?
No, no. I think if anyone has the experience and they have a way to express it, no, nothing is off limits. I know
Yeah,
people say like kids and things like that, but there's definitely a clever way to speak about it. And I mean, here we are in America's freedom of speech,
right.
and yeah, you're gonna get people who don't agree or don't like it. But if we try to suppress or stop people from from speaking their minds, we got problems. So
Yeah.
no, I don't think anything's off
Yeah,
limits.
I know. I just had a episode with this other guy, Ryan Niemiller, and he said also he didn't think anything was off limits, and he qualified the statement, but he said that even like a white comic, that if they were telling a story and they had to say the N word in the story
Mm-hmm.
because it was like germane to the story and the people he had the trust of the audience. He had all these conditions, but he was like, and he was skilled enough to do it.
Right.
Then he felt like even that shouldn't be off limits. So I'm just throwing that out there. What do you think about that? You said nothing's off limits. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Saying the N word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you got to be clever enough, and you have to be intelligent enough to how to say it and to finesse it. But no, there's no.
Yeah. I feel like the free speech is like it's like if you don't have free speech, right? We're not going to be able to make the mistakes that we need to make to perfect our ways of communicating to each other.
Also, with free speech, you learn things about people, how they
Right.
really feel, and
Yep.
so so then that just adjusts how you approach them. So, it's very
Yeah.
important. Very
Yes.
important.
Yeah. Nah, absolutely. So let's see. We're almost done here, but I wanna like I know we got into some seriousness, which is awesome. I actually never gotten into this level of depth on the podcast, because usually kind of we start, it's like cracking, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also, I think, very important what we've been touching on. But
Right.
given like the state of our nation right now and the polarization that people are seeing, do you think that we've like the American project is capable of recovering? And do you think comedy has a role in that recovery?
Yeah, you answered it. Yes, of course. I don't know if you noticed it, but entertainment, music, comedy, we're the first ones to be the front lines of expressing those issues or bringing up those issues. But yeah, we definitely, we're survivors. We're human beings. We're survivors. This is the day of reckoning, and I don't know if it's ironically, but Trump has definitely brought those people out, and it's like a boil, it's like a pimple. You have to get that out. You really have to get
Mm,
that out. See, oh, these people still exist, and this is how they feel, and they have to understand that it's a new day, it's a new dawn, it's a new day, and people of color, are showing up, and they're studying, they're learning, especially with the internet. You can get information from across the planet within seconds, you
yeah.
know. So, and I think a lot of the MAGA people are afraid of losing that power that they have, and they're
Mm,
seeing, and yeah, they're panicking. But you can panic as much as you want, and you can say and resist whatever, but it's happening. It's gonna happen.
yeah. Nah. And the last thing I'll touch on, like, one of the things I've been reconciling lately is like I grew up, like I said, I had a white stepmom. I grew up partially in Mississippi and Virginia, and I saw a lot of poor white people who don't realize that they have a common cause, just like how I think Martin Luther King was trying to teach them, teach all of us. And so is like Dr. Barber with the Poor People's Campaign, that the common cause that we have. And there's like I haven't figured it out yet, but I have this idea in my mind that there's like a golden joke that's like universally funny, like almost like going on the quest for the golden joke, and that when someone tells the golden joke, then the whole world will laugh, and the whole
Yeah,
world will be like, "Whoa, that was hilarious." We've released the tension that we've been holding on our bodies,
that's
and
pretty
now we
cool.
can
I
have
like
some
that.
peace. Yeah, I know we should make a movie about it.
Yeah, but then you got to find out what the golden joke is, or
Yeah.
maybe the golden joke would be, you go to the mountain, whatever, and he whispers it in the person's ear, and they bust
Oh
out
yeah.
laughing, and then that's the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I want to find out the golden joke. So that's what, like, in our future collaborations, because I know we're talking about doing brain buffets together and stuff like that.
Right.
That maybe we'll, in the course of it, we'll discover what's universally funny to all people, and we'll release the golden joke, and the world will be saved.
Yeah, yeah. I like that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being up here. How can people reach you or see your shows or whatever information you want to put out there for them to contact you?
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I guess. But most like Instagram. It's Wali Collins, WaliCollins. Yeah, I'm there. Reach out to me there. DM me if you want.
Awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. All right, cool, man. Well,
Yeah,
take care. Thanks for being on
yeah.
the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad I dressed up for
Awesome.
it.
Cool. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. The What's So Funny About podcast was brought to you by the Liberation Comedy Project, which is being incubated by Mediators Foundation, mediatorsfoundation.org, and managed by Unify, YOUNIFY.org. Stay tuned for future episodes and check out past episodes as we work to bring more light, laughter, and love to this world through the Liberation Comedy Project. Bye for now.